Okay, my guest today is Canadian military illustrator Ron Volstad, who lives in Edmonton, Alberta. He's created works for Squadron Signal Publications, Osprey, Heritage Canada, I believe, and most famously for Dragon Models Limited, which, if you're a modeler, you've probably got his box art up on your wall somewhere. I'm most fortunate to be able to interview Ron here in his studio. I wasn't expecting this, which is quite an honor, and thank you for inviting us into your home today, Ron.
Oh, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Yeah, it's been over, I think it's
29 years.
29 years.
Yeah.
No.
Well, that's when we met.
That's when we met, and then you were at World Expo in '98. Yeah, and that's when I got my second Ron Volstad print.
There you go.
Okay, so I got here about an hour and a half ago. We've just been talking. Finally got the cameras out. You were talking about growing up in southern Alberta.
Yeah, I was born in Claresholm. That's where my grandparents had immigrated, and they had a homestead northeast of town.
And where were they from?
They came from Norway, from a small community called Volstad. Actually, there's two small communities there. I don't know which one, but my cousin did a university thesis on the family history, and we were here a long time before any of those Italian folks were.
So, Claresholm was a British Commonwealth Air Training Plan base during the war, and did that, I assume, like everybody on the prairies, that had an effect on you growing up?
Well, it did. Every farm around had some form of military surplus on it from aircraft. Our farm, we had a Jeep that we got for Grandpa to tootle around the farm on. And he unfortunately did not put the brake on one time, and it rolled into the lake.
Oh, jeez.
My uncle was quite annoyed with that. Yeah, the wrecking yards had old Canadian military pattern trucks. There were men in uniforms around town still.
Yeah.
The base didn't close until 1958, and that's actually when we left to move to a town west of Edmonton called Edson. That's where I went and did my schooling. Okay.
Now, when you were in high school, I understand you were the centennial class of 1967, and you did a mural on Canadian history?
Yeah, that's right. I had a good teacher. She would say to the class, "Today we're going to do still lifes. And Ron, what are you going to do?" So she just let me loose. She didn't think she could teach me anything, although she was quite good as a watercolorist. But yeah, it was a project that I'm not sure how it came to be, but it was a big 4x8 sheet of plywood on which I painted the history of Canada as a 17-year-old saw it, and it got the attention of the media, and it ended up with me having a job starting off as a summer help at a television station. It got me a full scholarship to the Alberta College of Art, and all for naught because my father fell ill and I had to go back to Edson and help run the business till it could be sold. And,
okay.
So those were sort of the in-between years.
Right.
During that time, I did some drawings, and I did have them published in an American model magazine in 1971, I believe.
And which one was that?
That was Scale Models magazine. And a friend of a friend found them in an archive and sent me or gave me a couple of them. It's nice to see those drawings from more than 50 years ago. You know, it's
yeah, I bet.
They're not particularly accurate, but then I had almost nothing for reference.
Well, and you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Now you did go into a career in art. You were a courtroom sketch artist.
Well, the way it worked out was I did send away sample drawings in 1972 to, I don't know a dozen different potential clients. And Squadron Signal Publications saw that there might be some use of my work, and I met Uwe Feist in 1973 and illustrated Fallschirmjäger in action that year. And that in itself would become the highlight of my career. The next year, in 1973, I was in Europe walking down the Via Veneto in Rome, and I saw a small bookshop just on a corner, and I looked in a window, and there was that book in the window.
Oh, wow.
Well, I've never had a better feeling about my work than I did right at that moment.
Oh, wow.
It's surprising that it came so early, but they didn't have enough work to keep me busy full time, so I found work in construction, and I helped install natural gas pipelines for home service. I worked out in the country and lived in the city.
Yeah.
Perfect world for about a dozen years.
Yeah.
And then it became time to
there we go.
Time to see if there were other things to do, and so I quit because I wanted to see what went on in all those business towers. I had a job as a insurance evaluator, and that was interesting for a year. And then as I was losing interest, I received a note from Martin Windrow at Osprey Publishing and asking whether I'd be interested in doing work for them and to send a sample drawing, of which it just surfaced.
Oh, wow.
This is the drawing that I sent to him.
Wow.
It was done in watercolor and graphite, and I used that for a fair bit, and I'm back to watercolor or acrylic and graphite now.
Okay.
As techniques, but I asked my wife. She had married a truck driver and ended up living with an artist. But you got to do what you got to do, she said, and I did. And well, I learned the difference between doing part-time art and full-time art. It's an extra 40 hours per week.
Exactly.
And Osprey kept me as busy as I could possibly be. And I did, in a very short time, about 35 titles for them. And I probably would still be doing Osprey art, but my editor, Martin Windrow, decided to go off on his own with his own publishing company. And right at that same time, I was approached by the owner of Dragon Models. The company was brand new, just a year old. And would I be interested in working with them? Well, I was young enough to take chances, and I did. And he kept me busy doing book illustration and the like before I ever did model boxes. And essentially, I was there from their whole plastic model beginnings. I learned the industry quite well, but in the last 20 years, the industry's changed 100%, and I know nothing anymore.
Now, are you still doing illustrations for
I
Dragon?
still am doing illustrations for Dragon. I figure I've done approaching 400 box tops for them now. And I fell ill a few years back, but they've remained kind and considerate. They knew I could no longer make my deadline, so they've given me work that just deliver it when it's done. So I remain loyal. That's both a positive and a negative in this illustration world, but I learned a long time ago that it's better to have one boss than multiple bosses.
Yeah.
You know, but it's interesting working with them because I developed as an artist most of my illustrations were book illustrations showing uniforms. And to do that, you have a fellow standing there in the best pose to show everything. But for the model soldiers, you wanted some action. And that was a real struggle for me. It took about 15 or 20 figure sets for me to get going that way. Most of my work from the beginning was I was my own model with a full-length mirror, and later I used a Polaroid camera, set the timer, and strike the pose. But I became friends with a fellow, and it was his suggestion, well, why don't I pose for you? His name was Pete Brunel, and he became my closest friend. And 40% of my artwork involving figures were probably him posing for me. He was a natural, a real actor. He went on to become a RCMP and had a full career, but unfortunately suffered from PTSD at the end. But I had many others willing to take over, and when he was posted elsewhere, and I've always used a human for my artwork now. And the biggest improvement was, beyond that, was simply taking the lighting off my camera and putting it remotely.
Right.
Then you have control of light, you have different lighting, nothing looks the same. You can screw it up easily and have to reshoot the photographs or work twice as hard. But that's been the way that I've worked.
Well, this is probably a good time to throw a question out from YouTube. I asked a few YouTube friends I have if they'd have a question for you, and the first one comes from don't know if you've heard of him, Martin Kovacs. He has a YouTube channel called Night Shift.
I've heard of it.
Yeah,
yes.
he's an exceptional modeler, and he asks, I've always wondered about your creative process. When you compose your artwork, do you take inspiration from historical pictures, or do you use your own imagination, especially with pictures that you've created for dragon figures? I know a lot of modelers use your box arts as reference materials for dioramas. They're so good.
Okay, the process is, it's been standard through my whole life. You take inspiration from something. Sometimes it's a photograph, sometimes it's a John Wayne movie. And then you work from there. You do some sketches, you see if it'll work out. If it's figure art, then you find somebody to pose for it. And then from that you make a drawing, and then from the drawings you start working in color. But that's been the case. I'm a voracious reader. I have a substantial library. I'm mostly interested in the personal experiences of a soldier, especially combat soldiers. And it matters not the country or what, I just want to know what their experience was. And the more I know or learn, the less I know. And I look back at some of the work that I've done and just shake my head and say, oh, that's pathetic. But you know what you know when you know it. You can't.
And we're our own worst critics.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's another story that we'll get into shortly. But yeah, so there's a routine, and it doesn't change. There's opportunities at each step. First, there's the inspiration. Well, you got to make sure that it suits the time and place.
Yeah.
And that you understand the equipment and everything being used. And that's followed. Well, that's the research end of it. It's easy now with Google and online search engines, but I had to rely on friends' collections, my photographs from travels, and my library that I built so that I could be totally independent. And I still have to use my friends' libraries and
Yeah.
collections because you can't have it all. But after you've got enough, then you proceed to the drawing, and this will be any number of tracings. You start with your figure, your subject, or your tank, and you make. I use tracing paper. Every artist does,
Yeah.
and and you trace and you get the basic shape, and then you make sure all of the detail is correct for that, and that takes a second drawing. And sometimes I've been foolish enough to go into color after the second drawing, and I'm almost always regretting that decision because there'll always be something wrong. There'll be a road wheel that's a kilter or something, and it's impossible to correct at the color stage. So always 3 drawings now. It doesn't take that much longer. I'm not saving any time. And sometimes it's 6 drawings. There's been many times that it was like that, especially in the early days. And once you've got that, then you transfer your drawing to your illustration board. The old ways were using grid patterns, and then I got an overhead projector. 1985, I believe. I still use it from time to time on larger projects. And then a graphics friend of mine says, "Have you seen this printer? It'll print on illustration board up to 13 by 19. Well, most of my work for Dragon was 11 by 17, so perfect. It'll print out my drawing via Photoshop and onto my illustration board, and you save days of time in the transfer. The other thing it does is allow you to make your mistakes a lot faster and more frequent because you know it only takes half an hour to print out another one.
Yeah.
But the painting is the fun part. It's also frustrating sometimes, despite keeping notebooks of every process, every color mix. I try it the next time and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So every painting is brand new.
So another YouTuber who I personally know is Evan from Panzermeister 36. He primarily builds Stugs. That's his thing. So he asks, what's been your favorite tank to draw or paint, and why is it the Stug?
I've done a lot of Stugs, and I quite enjoy them. It's a unique vehicle, and it was meant to support infantry, which makes it closer to my interests. I don't know that I've ever had a favorite, but I've done more Panzer IV marks than any other single thing. Doesn't mean I know my marks. I still have to go to the reference books or talk to my friend Tom Cockle, who is an expert.
Yeah.
And he'll set me straight quickly. I've had a real diverse selection of subjects. I don't have anything favorite, but I prefer something that's in action. I don't like the one-offs and the things that never got to the front. It's just a matter of interest. There's no real reason other than that. But the Stugs, one of the first figure sets I did for World War II was the German Stug crew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all through doing the figure sets for Dragon, we didn't know if all of a sudden people were going to stop buying.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just carried on. You never knew if that was going to be your last one. Well,
Yeah.
200 figure sets later, I know different. But so the first figure set I did of a vehicle crew was for the Stug, and they had to be kind of generic. And
Right.
one of the biggest mistakes I think we made, and I'm at fault as much as anything, was we didn't put information sheets in with the figure sets that could have described things a lot better,
Oh, right.
and
Okay.
just assumed that everybody would know history like I know history. But of course, that's not correct. But yeah, I like the Stugs, especially the G models, simply because the end of World War II, 44, 45, and even 43 are the areas that I'm most interested in. Most variety, most selection of campaigns,
Hmm.
and but I don't know that I've ever made a model of one.
Yeah.
Certainly, I've had them all, but
What's been your favorite work to date?
the next one,
The next one. Yeah.
that would probably be the truth.
Hmm.
Um, there's some that I don't have much recollection in actually doing.
Do you get sentimental about previous works, or is it?
No, it's just a job. Get it in the mail. As soon as you got it in the hands of the shipper, you get paid.
Yeah.
It's it's a job. And Dragon very early said, we want to own the artwork.
Right.
We want to be able to use the image, and we'll pay you for reuse if it's non-standard. And they did, and that's fine. I don't know how I would store 400 pieces of
Yeah.
original artwork. It's
So, one last question before we move on to what I call the replicator questionnaire.
mhm.
Do you still find time to model?
ah, we just found out today, didn't
We
we?
did.
Yes. Uh, I modeled from 1983 when I started artwork full time. Modeling changed. It became just for me.
Right.
It was my pastime, and I like to model Canadian military World War II. There only been subjects available in the last 10 or 15 years, so I did a lot of scratch building, and I have probably a dozen and a half kits or models on the go. They're not all kits, some of it's scratch built, but it was very useful because I'd pick complex subjects, and after my workday was done, I could go to the model bench for 2 hours and change focus 100% and clear my mind so that I could go to sleep, so that I could get rest, so I could get up at 6 a.m. and do it all over again, 7 days a week.
Oh, wow.
But no, there's some I like better than others. There's a couple of Yag Panther images that I did, one or two of the tigers. Didn't do enough allied stuff to throw that in as favorites.
Yeah.
They always came as a surprise, and I wasn't ready for them. The yeah, the next one.
The next one.
That's my favorite.
So I've created this thing called the Replicator questionnaire, and anybody I interview is going to get a version of this at the end. If you've ever watched The Actors Studio with James Lipton, you're probably familiar with the questionnaire, which he presents to his guests at the end of the interview. He credited French TV host Bernard Pivot with it, and it has been mistakenly attributed to the famous French novelist Marcel Proust, who did not create it, but instead famously wrote the quiz twice in his lifetime. So I've stolen it from all of them and made a modeling edition. So without further ado, Ron Volstad, this is the Replikator Questionnaire Modeler Edition. First question, what do you like about our hobby?
It's the history. I tried automotive modeling when I was a teenager. And that's because cars were part of growing up.
Yeah.
But I was very soon back into history, military history, but history in general was my primary interest. And I found that learning about what experiences my uncles had in the Canadian Army was a motivator. They didn't say much, but what I heard was enough to make me want to know more. And when I grew up, we knew that Germany was the enemy at the time, but there was no information about them. And so I was curious, and I started looking that direction. And now the balance has gone way over the other way.
Yeah.
But, and so if it were to be lived again, I would have been happy just doing Canadian military history. And there was so much of it, I would never be short of subject material.
Okay. Now, given your position in the industry, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but it's the opposite question. What do you dislike about our hobby?
Oh, complainers. Yeah, I started the hobby when we were happy to have 2 1/35th scale model kits out per year. So you learned to scratch build if you wanted.
Right.
There were modelers doing 1/32nd scale before that, and they would make them out of styrene.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah.
so people who say, "Oh, it's not the perfect model," and "Oh, it's got this wrong or that wrong," and we'll fix it. You know, it's I'm a bit fussy myself now. You know, I'd rather have an Asuka Sherman than a Dragon Sherman because it takes less effort to make it right.
Right.
But and I built one perfect model in my life, and that was to me what is it, the little not Challenger,
Chieftain?
no, World War II. Anyhow, it was the perfect model. There was
right,
nothing to
yeah.
be done except add 2 bolts on either side of the hull.
Yeah.
And it was the most boring time I ever had at my model bench. Never again, you know, unless you need to build one in a hurry, you know.
Exactly. What is your favorite subject to model, or in your case, illustrate?
Well, I think we've already answered that. Canadian military
Exactly.
history, World War II.
What would you like to see released as a kit?
Oh, it's all here now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. CMP, HUP, a staff truck.
Right.
Somebody keeps promising it. It's not here yet.
That's been a very unrepresented area. There are a lot of CMP kits out now.
Yeah,
But
they're on the difficult edge or the cartoonish edge.
exactly.
Unfortunately,
What's your favorite genre of modeling?
in which way?
Well, usually, I guess that would be asked if somebody was building, aircraft and cars and ships.
No.
But I guess in your case, I guess it goes back to Canadian military. That's
Yeah, anything that had to do with the frontline troops, whether it's ambulances, tanks, holes in the ground, anything like that. Buildings that are appropriate for the area, the period. There's been model designers who actually lived where this stuff was
right.
that didn't bother to get it right, you know.
So no offense to the Canadian Military Postal Service, but that's not your cup of tea.
That's right.
What other hobby or pursuit would you have liked to have tried?
Oh, half my life I was an outdoorsy type. I hiked and climbed and biked, and I would have liked to have been able to have the time to keep that in my life. I bought a bike to ride again. Then I remembered why I stopped riding a bike. It's just too dangerous. It's even with bike paths and so on and so forth, other bikers can kill you. And, I break my arm, I am out of work, as I found out.
Right.
But I, I guess just reading, I'm a voracious reader, and I don't have to go to the library. I just don't. I can recycle. I read a book and I say, no dog ears in it. Maybe I didn't read this before. But there's a lot that I don't recall reading ever. So I just want the knowledge of what it was like to be at a certain place at a certain time. And I've had 10 or 11 trips to Europe, and I've balanced it well with having a good time as well as doing research. And I've got many friends there now that I'd like to go visit, but I'm afraid that health issues put traveling in the past tense now. But that's okay, because we didn't waste time. We had good times. But no other hobbies, maybe one-to-one restorations, but small things. But I'm old enough to know that, oh yeah, there was a place in town that had a stack of a half dozen universal carriers. I remembered when there was 3 Staghound armored cars parked one place or another, and I remember every road when I was doing my construction work. Yeah, down that road there's a guy who's got a 3-ton Canadian military pattern truck, and there's a cab over there, and they're all taken now by people doing the right thing. But no, that's just a one-trick pony here. There's not much going on here except artwork, model building, and maybe a good meal or two when I can find them.
Now, you've said your traveling days are behind you. Is there anywhere you would have liked to have gone?
I never got to New York City.
Oh, wow.
I would have liked to have just seen it. I've would have liked to have gotten back to Normandy. I only made it there twice, and both times were rushed. But there's a lot of places where I've been where I didn't realize there was actual Canadian combat going on right where I was standing. I find these things out when I get home and I read about it. I try to organize my travel so that I know what I'm doing, but that doesn't always work out. But no, I never did get to Hong Kong. Don't want to go this weekend. It's a little bit wet. But that wasn't anybody's fault. It's just the way it worked out. But I wouldn't go now because that's 14 hours flying. And even in first class, that would be
that's a rough
trying.
Trip,
Yeah.
My last question. Throughout your career, who have you or what have you drawn inspiration from?
The first artist I was aware of was Norman Rockwell, and that's because the homestead at Claresholm got Saturday Evening Post every week. And as often as not, there was a Rockwell painting on it. So that's the sort of thing that I would have aspired to. Unfortunately, I'm personally 90% inspiration, 10% ability. And so there's no way that I could do things like that. I had hoped to be doing oil paintings by this time in my career, But Mrs. V has asthma, and opening up solvents in her present just did not seem like the wisest thing to do. And you did ask what I would do as another hobby. I'd rather make some paintings for myself, non-military, things about my life. And there's a spot on the second easel just waiting for me there, and I keep putting it off. But I think maybe it's time to do a few of those.
I want to see those.
Yeah. But I've recorded my life through photographs and notes with that in mind, but always just doing the job and paying the bills took up the time.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'll finish by saying that I've been a success simply by being an artist who made his living through his art. It didn't seem possible when I was 17, living in a backwoods town a long ways from New York, Chicago, and Toronto, or Los Angeles, where publication centers were. There weren't any express delivery options back then. You had telephone or snail mail, and in fact I did send one comic book story that I drew and wrote to DC Comics, I think, in New York.
And what was the response?
Well, they returned it and says, it's very nice, but we don't need any more artists at this time. Well, okay, I just left it at that. And one time when I was standing around in the drugstore waiting for something, I picked up a war comic off the comic rack, and I flipped through it, and it's not my artwork, but that's my story.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, well, can't blame them, I guess. It was a good story. I still have the original artwork for that. I've kept a number of pieces that were fairly poignant to me or represented something, or that nobody wanted to buy. You know,
Right.
I found it intriguing that I did an Osprey title on the Canadian military in World War II, and I didn't receive a single response about buying that artwork. Not one.
Wow.
Zero. But that's my fellow countrymen. That's the way we are.
Yeah.
But I've had people approach me from military regiments, and do you know anybody who can do a painting for us for our collection? Truth is, they never wanted to pay for it or pay enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, it's been grateful for this work. Didn't work out exactly as I planned, but I don't think many lives do. And
what's the old saying? Life is what happens when you make plans.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm beyond that now, and I'm grateful for having a client like Dragon, and I have a private client, as Long Wen, who fills in the gaps nicely, and at least keeps the cash flowing, and I can still live in this humble abode. And but I had my choice. I could have lived anywhere. I tried, but first 10 years of our marriage, we moved every 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And now I've been here for 32 years, so it obviously was comfortable for me.
Yeah.
But anything else, Dana?
I think that's about it. We've got a lot of ground covered in this, and I'd like to thank Ron for, again, inviting me into his studio, which I didn't expect, and for telling us about his career.
Well, thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was a unique opportunity. I've done a bit of television, but I was never the focus.
Well,
Well,
I think your story deserves to be told. It's
yeah,
you got a lot of fans out there.
yeah. And as soon as you leave, I'll be saying to myself, "Oh, I should have brought that up. I should have talked about this."
We'll do it next year.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks. Now with a pencil, because I can't grasp a paintbrush like I used to.
Right.
And so I can get the detail with pencil and I can paint over it, or I can add golden super matte medium that is 100% matte every time, and you can just mix it with water. It doesn't affect it. Makes all the shiny bits of pencil disappear.
Quite the
Illustration board, well, that becomes that's a sore point with me, because the digital art direction has put paid to a lot of the boards that I used to use. But I prefer a smooth board now, because it's easier to get the detail. It's harder to paint on, but I figured it out. I used to like a rough board, a slightly rough board, because it took the paint better, but it didn't take the detail as easily. So an old fellow has to do what he has to do.
So what brushes do you use? I see you've got...
I use cheap ones.
You use cheap ones, and
Yeah.
why is that?
Acrylics are hell on brushes.
Ah, okay.
You can clean them, and they're not going to have that point that you had. I used to use Winsor Series 7,
Yeah.
and they were great for a project, maybe, and then they would die. And $30 for a tiny brush is way too much when I can get 6 brushes for the same price. I use some of the small Princeton ones for detail,
Okay.
something like that. But if I've got to use a brush that small, I may as well use a pencil.
Yeah, that's true.
And a noted artist, James Gurney of Dinotopia fame, just shared a comment last week about a painting that was multimedia. He says, well, that's sort of a term to use, but anything that puts pigment on your work surface doesn't need to be called anything else. You are getting pigment down, and it doesn't matter how it's applied. If it's the results that are the important thing. But
So these are the tools of the trade.
they are. Note the model paints
Yeah.
are handy, but Holbein acrylics, fluid acrylics, and again Holbein acrylic gouache.
Okay, one sec. Okay, so those are,
Holbein acrylic gouache.
and that's your go-to?
Yeah, it is, and it's an opaque watercolor with an acrylic binder in it. They tend not to shift color, and that's why they are invaluable.
Okay.
But I use golden liquid or fluid acrylics, plus golden airbrush acrylics, and I use Vallejo, and I use AK. And there's a few other brands. I've tried every acrylic that's been made available in Canada, and to the point that I order what I don't have from whoever has it. But
That's quite the...
and there we got 2 friends that have posed for various things. These pictures would be 20 years old, probably taken for the Osprey book on the Canadian Forces. But
I thought I recognized the poses.
yeah, my friend Gary and Steve. Steve's retired Army, and now he's a bird photographer, and he has more talent in his little finger doing that I'll send you some photographs.
Is that Gary Edmondson?
Yes, that is.
He's from Sunderland, where my grandfather's from.
Oh, is that how you have the connection?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started talking to him about a year ago about that.
He goes back regularly, and but he's the post for a majority of the Dragon figure sets.
Oh, wow.
You know, it was handy. He kept himself fit. He was roughly World War II sized, and he was able to wear the uniforms, the World War II uniforms.
Oh, wow.
Not all my stuff is original. I've got reproduction, and I get reproduction done to the World War II size. And but now all my models have aged out. And as a matter of fact, I was at a recent model show, and I had a little sign. Anybody interested in posing?
Yeah.
And still have a World War II physique? Let me know. And 3 people did. So.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I drew Gary's face first, but that wasn't working out. So I used Steve's face from a similar pose.
Okay.
And sort of blended them. I'm not sure I'm happy with that. I could easily get a flesh tone cover up and a start again thing, but I'm sort of used to that, where my wife says I'm just stubborn, and that would be the truth.
There you go.
But yeah, trip to the art store, I'm always coming home with at least a dozen brushes, and there's nothing worse than running out on what you need on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
But, and I keep my project books on the floor. This is where the project stuff is, and this is where I keep things that I refer to regularly.
Well, thanks for showing us behind the scenes.
Well,
this is,
yeah,
and you got some of your
equipment. German headphones up there.
Oh, jeez.
I use them a lot, so I never put them away.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then I've got closets full of uniforms.
Whereabouts are those? Over here?
Right behind you.
Oh, my.
Helmets. I started getting helmets because helmets are all compound curves and they're really hard to draw.
Yeah.
Hard to draw even when you have them.
Oh, wow.
That's my father-in-law's South Alberta badge.
Oh, wow. An original.
Oh, and there we go. VIP, Canadian Modeling Exposition, 94.
Oh, yeah. I remember calling you up, seeing if you'd come out to it.
Yeah. But it's time to downsize this stuff. It's I keep what I'm afraid to let anything go for fear. As soon as it's gone, I'll need it.